you doing, Internet? I'm Beanuts, and today I would like to share a specialty with you that I've been doing for years. Because we all have this thing, and I believe that we cook when we start university or college, and we just keep on doing it over and over and over. I like casserole for its versatility. You can adjust it and adapt it to your liking, although of course it won't fit with every diet. Now you have pasta, you have a milker substitute, but if you can find a substitute that works for your diet, even if you have an allergy or a sensitivity, then I say go ahead, because that's going to make it much easier for you. A casserole is a dish that has pretty much every component of a good meal in it. You have the carbs you might need, the starches, you have the vegetables, as well as the calcium in the dairy and so on. That said, the recipe that I use doesn't follow any particular dietary restrictions and is adapted from the recipe that my mother gave me before I went off to university. So it has a certain level of adjustability to it. If I wanted to switch something up, I could. And it's not really that much different from the casseroles that my mother used to cook, but it is its own thing because it keeps on changing. So I will share with you the general recipe, and you can decide how you want to adapt it for itself. And I use mostly prepared ingredients. As a final note, this is cooking a large dish, not baking. So you don't have to be so accurate in your measurements or anything. In fact, I basically only measure one thing as I'm doling it out to put into this particular dish. And I do often change things up, the pasta ratio to everything else, the vegetables. I change this dish basically every time I cook it. So here are the general ingredients for one of my tuna casseroles. I'm going to start off with about 500 grams of small shaped pasta. For example, small shells, macaroni elbows, or the little spirals you can use. Then you have 3 tins of tuna. They can be flaked or chunked, it doesn't really matter. And they shouldn't be stored in anything heavy, probably just water will do. Then you have 2 tins cream of mushroom soup. If you want to prepare something from scratch that does the same job, just to make things creamier, you can do that. The vegetables, which I usually do from frozen, about 500 grams again. And since the bags from frozen at the grocery store usually come in 900 grams, you can usually take the equivalent of 2/3 or so of a package and just sort of fudge that as well. For my greens, at least this past time, I mixed up an Asian mix and the Californian mix. So I had in it red peppers, mushrooms, some onions, broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots. So I had some nice variety there. 3 cups milk or milk substitute. I found that soy milk and almond milk, cashew milk, they all work perfectly fine. They do have somewhat different tastes. Soy milk is sweeter than regular milk, and that will also come through at least faintly in the casserole once it's cooked. Then you have 2 options. You can use breadcrumbs and you can use cheese, your choice of flavor. I generally like the breadcrumbs. It makes things nice and crunchy, and the cheese is also generally a nice touch. For seasoning, I go for simplicity itself. There's one thing that my entire family uses when we cook something, anything, for our dinner, whatever, and that's garlic powder. Later on, if you want, you can add pepper or salt to individual taste. Those are all the ingredients which I use for my tuna casseroles. So I will now go on and guide you through the steps to preparing and cooking this. The preparation is generally relatively quick. It should take about half an hour, 40 minutes at most, and then you just put it in the oven. And when I put it in the oven, I generally use a pan and parchment paper just to make the cleanup a little bit simpler. So first, find a medium to large pot, fill it to about 2.5 liters water, about halfway on a good sized pot, and then set it to boiling. Once the water is boiling, you can put in the pasta, just 500 grams or so. It can be more, it can be less. You can set aside any leftovers that you have, if you have any at all. I generally don't, but then again, I also have the pan pretty full. Once you have the pasta cooked to your taste, then you drain it and put the pasta back into the pot on the oven. And that's where you will start mixing all the ingredients together. I generally put the tinned tuna in first, mix it, and as I'm mixing it, put in the garlic powder to season it a bit, just a little bit on the top of all surfaces, and then mix and fold until everything is meshed together well and the tuna is spread out. Afterwards, you put in the vegetables, again mix and fold. You do not have to boil the vegetables separately. I used to do that, but it is an unnecessary step if you don't want to do that. If you want to keep your dirty dishes and such to a minimum, you can just put the vegetables into the pot with the tuna and the pasta, and the heat from having boiled the pasta will defrost the vegetables enough to be able to mix and fold it in. If you like, you can add some more garlic powder to the mix at this point. But afterwards, you put in the tinned cream of mushroom soup, and you mix that. Mix it very well, because when it comes in shaped like a can, you'll want to have it spread out throughout the dish so that it coats everything and makes it nice and creamy. And I'm still, even though I just ate, just thinking about it is really whetting my appetite again. So after the creamy soup, you put in the 3 cups of milk, mix again, and if you want, add some more garlic powder. This is the last chance to add it, is with the milk. Once you have everything mixed to your satisfaction, bring your pot over to your pan and very carefully spoon it all into the pan. Try to make it nice and even. If you have your milk or a substitute going all to one side, you can use a spoon to transfer it over, and try to even it out so that it looks nice and flat or flattish, because the ingredients won't be all uniform. And this is where you will be able to tell whether or not you have any leftovers, which you can set aside for other meals or dishes. Generally, you can at least try to fit everything onto the pan. Use a 9.5 by 13 inch pan, Pyrex pan, and that generally works. If you want to, you can up or down scale the serving. However, even when I was in university, just the one decent sized pan did me for about a week. So that was a pretty good way to sustain and also not have to cook for a while if my schedule was heavy that week. Once you've got everything in the pan as even as you can, dust on the breadcrumbs, and you can do a bit away from the edge and just do it until everything is covered. The idea of that is that everything gets nice and crispy and crunchy when you cook it. After the breadcrumbs, you can add the cheese. And like I said before, you can choose whichever cheese flavor you like, and you can either shred it or just slice it off from the brick and then lay them out in strips as I do. That's entirely up to you. For me, I use usually mozzarella, although I can also occasionally do marble or cheddar. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and once it's ready, put the casserole in somewhere in the middle shelves and put it on for 50 to 56 minutes so that the cheese is a golden brown and the breadcrumbs on the top are nice and crunchy. And that's basically it. Once the timing is done, the oven has done its job, and your tuna casserole will basically be ready to eat. But do let it stand for a couple of minutes as it will be extremely hot. So that is my recipe for a tuna casserole. I hope that it is useful to you and that you can enjoy it to its fullest. Do feel free to change up the recipe a bit to your liking, find what works best for you, and share it with others as well. Because why not? If the dish works and people like it, it ought to be shared. Plus, those students among us can show their parents that they are self-sufficient and can cook for themselves a decently balanced meal. That does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and that you can use this recipe to your full enjoyment. If you liked this video, please comment or subscribe or like in order to show your support, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!